At 60, Margaret believed she had finally found love with a charming 25-year-old man. But what started as a sweet online romance soon turned into a nightmare. Margaret's excitement quickly faded when she realized the man she trusted had a terrifying secret. She ended up as meat on his plate, the fifth victim in a series of gruesome killings. What seemed like a fairy tale turned into a chilling horror, and Margaret's final moments would reveal the terrifying truth behind the man she thought she knew. How could a bond that began with such passion end in such horror? What happens when the mask of charm hides a darkness no one saw coming? Before we dive into this chilling case, make sure to like this video and subscribe to True Crime Stories Arena for more disturbing tales of deception, murder, and terror. Margaret Holloway had spent most of her 60 years living a quiet, somewhat solitary life. She wasn't unhappy, but she had always longed for something more, someone to share her life with, to fill the silence that sometimes felt a little too loud. She had experienced love before, but life had a way of pulling those people away. Friends got married, had children, and moved on with their busy lives. Margaret, on the other hand, stayed in her routine, mostly content but often missing the companionship she once had. So when she met Damon Reeves online, it was like a breath of fresh air. Damon's messages were thoughtful and kind. At first, Margaret was cautious. She had heard the warnings about online relationships and knew that some people weren't always who they seemed. But Damon was different. His words felt genuine, his attention focused entirely on her. Every conversation was filled with compliments, shared dreams, and promises of a future that seemed almost too perfect to believe. She found herself looking forward to every message, every video chat. There was something about him that made her heart race with excitement, something that had been missing for a long time. As weeks passed, Margaret couldn't help but feel like this was the connection she had been waiting for. She told her friends that she had met someone special online, someone who made her feel young again. They were supportive but cautious, warning her to take things slow. Still, Margaret couldn't deny the spark she felt. Damon was thoughtful, and his charm was undeniable. He made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't long before they were talking about meeting in person. Margaret could hardly contain her excitement. This was it, the moment she had been dreaming of. Damon, at 25, seemed to have it all together. His photos showed him smiling, standing confidently in front of beautiful places, and he had a way with words that made her feel like the most important person in the world. He spoke with passion about his work and his interests, and it was clear he cared deeply about the people in his life. Margaret couldn't believe her luck. Here was a man who was kind, attentive, and seemed to share her values. Their relationship grew stronger with every passing day. Margaret would talk about Damon to her friends, telling them how perfect he seemed. They were both excited for her, and she couldn't wait to meet him in person. She imagined their first date, long walks, dinners by candlelight, and conversations that would last for hours. It was the stuff of fairy tales, and Margaret was ready to live it. But to everyone around her, everything seemed just as perfect as she described. Her friends and family had no reason to believe anything was amiss. They only saw what Margaret wanted them to see, a loving, seemingly flawless relationship. Her social media was full of pictures of her and Damon, their smiles radiating happiness. Margaret was excited, and it showed in every post, every message she sent. It was like the whole world was rooting for her, cheering her on in this new chapter of her life. As the weeks went by, Margaret talked more and more about the upcoming trip to meet Damon. She had never been this excited about anything in a long time. It felt like everything was falling into place, like the universe had finally aligned to give her a second chance at love. She imagined walking hand in hand with Damon, the man who had filled her heart with so much joy and anticipation. She was so sure of this love, so certain that this was the beginning of something beautiful. To everyone around her, it looked like Margaret had found the love of her life. The online messages, the plans, the excitement, it all seemed so real. Everyone believed this was her fairy tale ending, the happily ever after she had waited for. But none of them knew the dark truth that lay just beneath the surface. They had no idea what would happen when Margaret finally met Damon face to face. Damon Reeves was the kind of man people naturally gravitated toward. He had an easy smile, a voice that could soothe or excite depending on the moment, and a way of making people feel special, like they were the only ones who mattered. But beneath that charming exterior, behind the carefully curated online persona, was something far darker. Damon had spent most of his life feeling like an outsider. He grew up in a small town where he never quite fit in, where whispers followed him down hallways and laughter cut through his skin like knives. He had been mocked, pushed aside, treated like something less than human. Over time, that isolation did something to him. It planted a seed deep inside, a bitterness that grew into something far more sinister. By the time he left that town, he had learned how to wear a mask, how to become exactly what people wanted to see. And most importantly, he had learned how to hide the truth. For Damon, deception wasn't just a habit, it was survival. He had perfected the art of being whoever he needed to be, shaping himself into the ideal friend, the perfect lover, the kind of man people trusted. It wasn't just about fitting in anymore, it was about control, it was about power. His obsession had started years ago, a slow-burning hunger that he couldn't quite explain at first. At first it was just thoughts, ideas that flickered in the back of his mind. Then it became a fantasy, one that grew more elaborate with time. By the time he met Margaret, it had turned into something more than a fantasy. It was a plan. She had been perfect, too perfect. She was kind, trusting, and completely infatuated with him. It had been almost too easy. Damon knew exactly what to say, exactly how to make her fall. He had studied people like her, the way they spoke, the way they longed for something more. He gave her everything she wanted, affection, attention, the promise of love, and she gave him exactly what he needed, an opportunity. For months, Damon had been preparing. His apartment had been transformed into something no one could have imagined. He had spent hours perfecting every detail, making sure that when the moment came, nothing would go wrong. Every tool was in place, every supply carefully stored, and through it all, he had left clues, little breadcrumbs, scattered across his social media. His posts were always about food, about preparation, about the importance of ingredients. Most people thought they were just jokes, clever little comments about cooking. Nothing beats home-cooked meals, fresh, organic, no additives. Marinating makes all the difference. Some of y'all too tough, need to be more tender. No one ever questioned what he really meant. No one ever looked past the words. Even as women started disappearing, as rumors of missing persons spread, Damon remained untouchable. He was too careful, too calculated. He knew exactly how to blend in. And yet, for all his planning, for all the precision and control, there was something lurking beneath the surface, something even he couldn't ignore. A part of him knew that Margaret would never truly understand. She saw him as a lover, a partner, someone who could bring her happiness. She had no idea what she was walking into. And yet, despite everything, there was a tiny, almost imperceptible part of him that wondered what it would be like if she did understand. If for once someone saw the real him and didn't turn away in fear. But Damon knew better. That kind of acceptance didn't exist, so he pushed the thought aside, silenced whatever flicker of doubt still remained. He had already decided how this story would end. The only thing left to do was wait for Margaret to arrive. Margaret Holloway had never been this excited in years. As she stepped off the bus and into the city where Damon lived, her heart pounded with anticipation. She had spent months dreaming about this moment, imagining what it would be like to finally be in his arms. The texts, the phone calls, the late-night conversations, they had all led to this. Damon had been just as eager, or so it seemed. He had messaged her that morning, telling her he couldn't wait to see her, making her laugh with one of his usual flirty jokes. When she finally saw him in person, standing outside his apartment, he was everything she had imagined. Tall, confident, that easy smile spreading across his face as he pulled her into a warm embrace. "You made it," he said, his voice smooth, familiar. And just like that, her worries melted away. The first night was perfect. Damon had gone all out, candles, music, a home-cooked meal. Margaret felt like the luckiest woman alive. She couldn't believe that after all this time, after all the years of loneliness, she had finally found someone who saw her, who wanted her. They stayed up late talking, drinking wine, sharing stories. Every time she laughed, he watched her closely, as if memorizing every detail. The next morning, Margaret woke up feeling lighter than she had in years. She spent the day exploring the city with Damon, holding his hand, taking pictures, feeling like she was living inside a love story. But as the hours passed, something began to feel off. It was little things at first, things she told herself she was imagining. The way he would sometimes fall silent mid-conversation, his eyes distant, his fingers tapping absently on the table. The way he would stare at her just a little too long when he thought she wasn't looking. There was also the apartment itself, so neat, so carefully arranged. Too careful. The fridge was strangely empty. The knives in the kitchen were all lined up perfectly, sharper than she had ever seen. And then there was the smell, something faint, something she couldn't quite place. That night, the warmth from the day before had faded. Damon was quieter, more withdrawn. He still smiled, still laughed at her jokes, but something about him had changed. His grip on her hand felt tighter. His eyes held something she didn't recognize. By the third day, the unease had settled deep in her bones. She picked up her phone and sent a quick message to her friend. "Hey, I don't know if I'm being paranoid, but something feels weird. He's acting different. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but I just have this feeling." Her friend responded almost immediately. "What do you mean? Are you safe?" Margaret hesitated. She didn't want to seem dramatic. "Yeah, I think so. He's just off. I'll let you know if it gets weirder." She put her phone down, trying to shake the creeping fear. "Damon, is everything okay?" she asked over dinner, forcing a smile, trying to shake the growing fear curling in her stomach. He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. Then, after a moment, the smile returned. "Of course," he said. "Why wouldn't it be?" And yet, something in his voice made her skin crawl. That night, Margaret barely slept. Every sound in the apartment made her jump. She told herself she was being silly, that she was just nervous about how much she liked him. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. She had to leave. The next morning, she woke up determined. She would tell Damon she needed to cut the trip short, make up an excuse if she had to. But when she walked into the kitchen, ready to speak, she saw the way he was watching her. His smile was gone. His fingers drummed against the table, slow, deliberate. "You're not thinking about leaving, are you?" he asked, his voice calm, too calm. A cold shiver ran down her spine. "I know, of course not," she said quickly, forcing a laugh. "I was just thinking maybe we could go out today, get some fresh air." Damon's head tilted slightly, his expression unreadable. Then he grinned. "Yeah," he said, "fresh air sounds good." But he never let her leave that apartment. By the time she realized she was trapped, it was already too late. Margaret never saw it coming. One moment she was standing in Damon's dimly lit apartment, her heart pounding from the unease she had been feeling all night. The next, everything went black. Damon had been planning this for months. He moved with precision as if he had done this before, because he had. Margaret's body hit the floor with a dull thud, and for a moment there was only silence, no struggle, no chance to scream, just the eerie stillness of a life suddenly extinguished. He wasted no time. He took her phone, powered it off, and removed the SIM card. Then, just to be sure, he shattered the device completely and tossed the pieces into a garbage bag. No signal, no way for anyone to track her, or so he thought. What Damon didn't realize was that Margaret had already left a trail, one small clue, seemingly insignificant, but enough to unravel everything. Hours before her death, she had sent a picture to her best friend, a casual selfie, smiling softly at the camera. But in the background, just barely visible through the window, was a distinct building, one her friend recognized instantly. It wasn't enough to confirm anything, but when Margaret stopped responding, her friend grew increasingly worried. At first, she tried to stay calm. Maybe Margaret was just busy. Maybe she had turned off her phone. But as the hours stretched into days, she knew something was wrong. And when she remembered the picture, her stomach dropped. She took it to the police. At first, they hesitated. There wasn't enough to act on, but Margaret's friend was relentless. She scoured the internet, comparing the image to street views, narrowing down potential locations, and then she found it, a rundown apartment complex on the outskirts of Portland, the same building from Margaret's photo. With this new lead, authorities had what they needed. A team was dispatched immediately. When officers arrived at Damon's door, he answered, calm as ever, but the moment he stepped aside, they knew something was terribly wrong. What they found inside would haunt them forever. The kitchen was a nightmare. The first thing that hit them was the smell. Something foul, something unmistakably wrong. Blood stained the floors, smeared in patterns that told a story of violence. The refrigerator door was slightly open, and inside, vacuum-sealed bags lined the shelves, each one labeled with dates, each one containing something unthinkable. And then there was the plate. On the counter, beside a half-empty glass of wine, sat a meal that had already been partially eaten, a neatly cut portion of cooked meat. The sight of it made even the most seasoned officers turn away in horror. Margaret Holloway, the woman who had once believed she was stepping into the happiest chapter of her life, had been reduced to this. The officers moved deeper into the apartment, their stomachs churning as they uncovered more. A chest freezer in the corner held more remains, frozen solid. Cutting tools, knives sharper than necessary for any normal cook, were lined up on the counter, clean, polished, waiting to be used again. Damon Reeves had been meticulous. But it wasn't just Margaret. The deeper they searched, the clearer it became. This wasn't his first time. Margaret was the fifth victim. As investigators combed through Damon's belongings, the horrifying pattern emerged. Women had been disappearing for months, all lured by the same charm, the same promises. Each one had walked into his home expecting love, companionship, never knowing they were walking straight into their deaths. Friends and family were devastated. Margaret's best friend, the one who had fought so hard to find her, was left with unbearable guilt. She had dismissed Margaret's initial concerns, not realizing how much danger she was truly in. As Damon sat in the back of a police car, hands cuffed, face unreadable, the world finally saw him for what he was, not a hopeless romantic, not a lonely man looking for love, a predator. And for Margaret and the 4 others who had come before her, the truth had come too late. As they drove Damon to the station, the media frenzy had already begun. News outlets were buzzing, reporting every detail of the gruesome discovery, with the chilling footage of his arrest soon becoming a viral moment. But Damon seemed unaffected. His cold indifference was unsettling, almost as if he were immune to the shockwaves his actions had caused. Back at the station, the interrogation began. Officers tried to break his silence, to get any kind of explanation, but Damon remained as stoic as ever. He said little, offering no remorse, no insight into the why of it all. He wasn't a man in crisis. He was simply a man who had carried out his actions without hesitation, his demeanor devoid of any human warmth, only reinforcing the monstrous reality of who he truly was. As the investigation continued, more details of Damon's background emerged. He had a history of manipulation, using charm and deceit to lure women into his life. His social media accounts, which had once appeared harmless, were now seen in a chilling light. Posts about food, tenderness and freshness, once thought to be benign, took on a dark significance. They had been cryptic clues, hints at his depraved desires all along, yet no one had recognized them until it was too late. Damon Reeves' trial was a long and grueling process, but in the end, justice was served. The courtroom was packed with the families of his victims, many of whom had to endure the horrific details of his crimes once again. The evidence was undeniable. His actions were meticulously planned, cold and calculated. The jury deliberated, and when they returned, the verdict was clear. Damon Reeves was guilty of multiple murders. The judge, after hearing the heartbreaking testimonies from the families, issued his sentence. Damon was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the judge spoke, there was no visible reaction from Damon. His expression remained unchanged, as if he had anticipated this outcome, as if he felt nothing at all. The families in the courtroom felt a mixture of relief and sadness. While the sentence meant that Damon would never harm anyone again, it could never bring back their loved ones. Margaret and the others were gone, and no amount of justice could undo the devastation he had caused. As Damon was led away, the media quickly seized on the verdict, reporting it as a final chapter in the shocking case that had captivated the nation. Yet for many, the sentence was a bitter reminder of the evil that had hidden behind a charming facades. In the weeks following the trial, public opinion remained divided. The significant age difference between Damon and Margaret became a central topic of discussion. At 60, Margaret had spent much of her life without a partner, believing she had finally found love in the form of a 25-year-old man. Some argued that Damon had preyed on her loneliness, seeing her vulnerability as an opportunity to manipulate her. His age, coupled with his charm, made it easier for him to deceive her into thinking he was genuinely interested in her. Many felt that the age difference was not just a matter of years, but a reflection of the power imbalance in their relationship. It raised questions about his true intentions and whether he had targeted her specifically because of her age and desire for companionship. Others, however, pointed to Damon's troubled childhood as a possible explanation for his actions. Raised in a small town, he had been subjected to years of rejection and ridicule, which shaped his view of relationships and power. Some believed that his actions were a manifestation of deep-seated trauma, a desperate attempt to gain control and validation after years of being ignored and mocked. While this didn't excuse his behavior, it offered an explanation for how he had come to manipulate and deceive others, especially someone like Margaret, who was seeking love late in life. Despite the arguments surrounding his past, the overwhelming consensus remained that Damon's actions were unforgivable. His crimes were not just about the age gap, but about how he had used his charm and deceit to prey on his victims. The public was left grappling with the complexity of his motivations while mourning the loss of an innocent woman who had only wanted to find love. Margaret Holloway's tragic end is a chilling reminder of how appearances can deceive. Damon Reeves' charm hid a darkness so deep that it ultimately led to the loss of innocent lives. This case serves as a painful reminder of how secrets and lies can destroy lives. Could this tragedy have been avoided if Margaret had seen the warning signs? How can we protect ourselves in a world where the internet often hides the truth? If this story shocked you, like and subscribe to True Crime Stories Arena for more chilling tales of deceit, betrayal, and the darkness lurking behind seemingly perfect facades.